Hi everyone, this video is in conjunction to lesson 2.2, multiplying or dividing with a negative number in an inequality. This is near the tail end of the lesson. What we have here is a situation where we have a compound inequality. So as you can kind of see, we have an expression that's being sandwiched by two other inequalities on the left and the right. What I want you to note here is we want to subscribe to that rule of what you do to one side, you must do to the other. In this case, we want to adjust that phrasing to make it plural. So in other words, what I do to the middle, I must do to the other two sides. Or in other words, what I do to one side, I must do to the others. So again, we would approach this problem in a very similar fashion as we had in the past. I'm going to go ahead and take care of this plus 5 first. So I'm going to subtract it from all three sides. Your goal is not to eliminate one of these sides entirely. You should still end up with three sides in your answer where the variable is isolated or alone in the middle. So in doing this, we create negative 3 is less than negative 3x is less than 6. So now we should ask ourselves, well, what should I do in order to get the x alone? The negative 3 is connected to the x, and you should ask yourself, how is it being connected? The answer in this case is it's connected through multiplication. If you don't see anything written in between the variable and the number, you can always work a little dot in there if you need to, or if you don't see anything, assume that it means multiplication. So in order to break that multiplication, I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by negative 3. That's going to clear this out. The result, negative 3 divided by negative 3 will give me a positive 1. We need to flip that sign, and hopefully you're aware of that from watching the two previous videos. That's going to give me x in the middle, and again, we're going to flip the sign, and we're going to have negative 2 here, because 6 divided by negative 3 is negative 2. So you might be saying, okay, well wait a minute, this doesn't kind of make sense, because usually in these situations, the smaller number is on the left-hand side and the bigger number is on the right. Technically what we have here is correct. We just need to rewrite it. So imagine, if you will, that, say this is on like a little stick and you're twirling that stick so that it's going to rotate. Okay. If we were to rotate this, x is going to stay as it is, but then as we are rotating, these inequalities are going to change direction. The negative 2 will now move to the one side, and the 1 will move to the other. If this doesn't kind of make sense, what I would suggest doing is getting a sheet of paper and using a marker that you know will bleed through. Write this inequality out and flip it over, and you'll see how I kind of got this situation. Also notice in your answer, the inequality was pointing at the negative 2. It's still pointing at the negative 2. This inequality here was pointing at the x. It's still pointing at the x. So what I want you to note here as well is that this inequality is represented over here, and this inequality is represented over here. Okay, they didn't just drop straight down and suddenly flip their position. So in order to finish this up, let's go ahead and talk about interval notation and the number line. We'll do the number line first, although let's use a darker color. So let's go ahead and just jot these down fairly quickly. Okay. So remember that in this case, we're going to go ahead and shade this up. And it looks like, okay, I should have my smallest value is at negative 2, so I'm going to go ahead and put a circle there. My largest is at a 1. Put it there. I'm going to keep these open, and specifically because I have strict inequalities. Both of these are strictly less than. There is no equal sign underneath. If there was an equal sign, I would go ahead and shade those in, but since there isn't, I leave them open. I basically want to be able to approach negative 2, but I can't use negative 2 in my solution. And if that's a little unclear, I would strongly suggest you coming to see me to get some clarification. Now, in order to figure out where to shade, we kind of have a pretty good indication based off of the inequality itself. The variable, or in other words my mystery number, is in the middle. So my shading is actually going to reflect that. When we go to do the interval notation, again, we go smallest number first. So my bubble landed on the smallest value of -2. And my shading continued up until it hit +1. Because both of these circles are open, and again, in other words, I'm not allowed to use them in my solution, I'm going to go ahead and use parentheses. So I'm saying I'm allowed to use any values that are in between. Now let me do one final explanation so that this makes sense, or hopefully it will make more sense if there's still some cobwebs or some fog there. Here's my answer. If I were to select something, say, over here, say I pick that -3, -2 less than, -3 less than 1. Take a look what happens. Here I'm saying -2 is less than -3. That doesn't make sense because -2 is further up on the number line, which means that it is bigger than -3. So that's why you don't see any shading in this area. Now let's go ahead and pick something on the other side. Say let's pick 2. So if I went ahead and put that in, I would have -2 is less than 2 is less than 1. So the first part makes sense. -2 less than 2. Yes, that is very true. But then we get to here where it says 2 is less than 1. That makes no sense. So that's why we don't use anything there. However, if we do pick something, say from the middle, let's see what happens in that case. So let's say we pick 0. -2 less than 0 less than 1. Is -2 smaller than 0? Yes. Is 0 less than 1? Yes. That's why all of our shading took place there. So finally, let me go ahead and touch on, say you went ahead and you picked -2. Well, if we did that, -2 is less than -2 is less than 1. Take a look at this situation here. We are saying that -2 is smaller than itself. That shouldn't sit well with you because it's not smaller. It is equal. But we don't have any equal signs underneath our inequalities. That's why we use the open bubble. We're not allowed to include them. So I hope that this has been helpful. If you do have any other questions, please let me know. Thank you very much.